Sometimes going after a wild idea means mustering up courage and speaking out when you know things aren't right, even if you have to risk important relationships, your livelihood, or your reputation. It can take a lot of courage to stay true to your integrity. Professional runner Alysia Montano knows how scary it can be to stand up for what you believe in. She's been using her voice to advocate for athletes who want to have children. Sometimes women in professional sports lose their sponsorships and brand contracts when they decide to become mothers. Alysia knows about this firsthand because it happened to her. A few years ago, she spoke out publicly about this issue, and her voice is still shaping the conversation in the industry today. I'm Shelby Stanger, and this is Wild Ideas Worth Living, an REI Co-op Studios production. Alysia Montano is a professional runner who's competed at the highest possible level. At one point, she was one of the top 3 runners in the world. She's a 2-time world champion and an Olympian. When Alysia competes, she runs with a flower in her hair. She tucks it into her ponytail because it represents something important to her.
The flower in my hair represents being bold and courageous. It's about recognizing just like the strength in my being. A flower a lot of times, represents like divine femininity in a lot of ways. We see it in so many different spaces where we are recognizing the feminine being. And it's not supposed to be the ultra cliche of give me flowers because I'm a girl. It's about taking back that idea of delicacy and how we see the flower represented. So wearing the flower in my hair as I'm moving my body in motion, knowing, that I am representing strength with that divine femininity. I wanted for that to be how people see women in sport.
Throughout her career, Alysia has worked hard to show the world that women athletes are strong and bold, and that their careers and accomplishments deserve respect. In 2014, Alysia became pregnant with her first child, and her sponsorship from a major brand was put on pause. She didn't have a source of income until she was able to hit her performance metrics again. This left Alysia in a tough spot. Her work was asking her to choose between having a baby and building her career. Eventually, Alysia spoke up. In 2019, she partnered with the New York Times to create a video that took the athletic industry by storm. Alysia Montano, welcome to Wild Ideas Worth Living.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You've done so much for women, for running, for moms. And I'm curious, in 2019, this article, that's sort of how I discovered you. There's this big article in the New York Times about being a mother and being a professional runner and how those two didn't jive. And you raised your voice and you made some things happen and changed the game for female athletes. And yeah. I'm curious, well, first, if you want to talk about that time, that had been really hard. But I'm really curious also, like, what's changed since?
Yeah. So I think, one of the things that I find really just interesting is how people see people. And this sounds so just basic, but what I mean by that is like, I think that as I grow into adulthood and, you roll into different partnerships and relationships, I feel like people forget the base of like the fact that we are all people, we're all human. And so for me, rolling into my career as a professional athlete, I never thought that I wouldn't have an opportunity to like be myself, that I would have to be boxed into a space that, one, is discriminatory, two, really oppresses individuals from like fully coming into themselves. Like many of us walk into this career as teens, some of us, early 20s, some of us, later on. But so for me, when I decided that I'm not going to let this discriminatory and systemically broken system dictate how I lead and live my life. I know adding children to your life, expanding my family in that way wasn't harming anyone. And I hoped that my partners and sponsors at the time would see me as human, which is like not a lot to ask for, but seems like it's a lot to ask for from people. And what I recognized in doing so was the holes that did not allow for there to be room for that to actually exist. And what I'm talking about is our contractual language that didn't have any space for maternity protections or growth in that area. You're just like, literally, when you're looking at a contract, you see no protections for yourself. It is a kind of a dark place to be in, where you're like, you just hope that somebody, trusts in the ability for humans to love one another and care for one another. And that just isn't the case if it's not in writing, which is sad.
So your contract was paused. Like, your contract with one of your biggest sponsors, when you got pregnant, they were like, we'll just pause your contract.
Yeah. So my first partner coming out of college, when I mentioned pregnancy protections and noticing that it wasn't within our contracts, I asked about like, hey, what would happen if I were to become pregnant and have a baby? And they so bluntly just noted, we would just pause your contract and stop paying you. And what I recognize is that this partner did not support women wholly, which to me, like, that's not somebody who I want to partner with. And then I decided I needed to move on to another partner in hopes that like that has to be a one-off. Like, they just are whack. And turns out it was an industry-wide issue. And I remember after having my daughter and having my contract cut for having her and proving myself, that's the biggest thing. It's like this proof point of like we have to prove our value, our ability to like be whole people, which is wild to me. And it was like, I won nationals at 6 months postpartum. I won nationals at 10 months postpartum. I broke an American record and a world record. I won 2 medals that year. I made the world championship team. And it was like...
You even raced when you were 8 months pregnant. Like,
I ran with that partnership 8 months pregnant, sharing about, my hope to destigmatize what career women could look like and just people. Like, I don't know. This is kind of how people end up here. Just so you know, all of you.
We all come out of a mom, yes.
All of you, yeah, we're a part of a pregnant person.
Alysia became a pro athlete right out of college, and she knew that the contract she signed expected her to perform at a world-class level no matter what. As a young woman who was thinking of starting a family, she understood that she'd probably lose her income during her pregnancy and postpartum period. It wasn't fair, but Alysia knew that it was par for the course in pursuing a career as a professional athlete. 6 years after she signed that contract, she had her first child, and her main sponsor paused their agreement. After she delivered her baby, Alysia worked hard to regain her performance and moved on. But when that same sponsor came out with an ad campaign a few years later, Alysia felt the injustice all over again. The ad was about being more than an athlete. It told viewers you can be a football player and a homecoming queen, a refugee and a pro soccer player. You get the idea. When Alysia saw the ad, she felt confused and defeated. How could this brand celebrate people being multifaceted while also taking away her athletic sponsorship when she became a mom? Fueled by years of frustration, Alysia took action.
When, that first partner that I was with came out with that ad, that was like, dream crazy. And I'm like, psych, no. That was just like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, I was like, that's not what you really believe in. And everybody's out here loving to pretend that they believe in women's rights and they believe in protecting women and helping women elevate and grow and, have a seat at the table, create their own rooms with seats at the table. It was BS. Like, I always just wanted to be authentically me. And I deserve the right to be that. And so with that commercial, it was like, on the record, here's the deal. And then it opened up the door for so many other athletes to tell their stories. And I didn't know that. Like, I was really like, I had nothing to lose. I was now 3 years without a contract because I told that partner that I wanted to have another kid, and they were like, absolutely not, which was shocking to me and devastating. But at the same time, I was like, I want people to work with me. If I share that this happened with more than one company, like, Like, how will I be supported? And what I recognized was like, there are so many women who won't get this opportunity to be supported if I don't speak up.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your why. Like, how did you get the courage to talk about something that was so scary? I mean, there's NDAs, there's all sorts of things that could happen. You did it anyway.
Yeah, definitely had my daughter, she was born in 2014, and that op-ed came out in 2019.
Wow.
So it was
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
It's a long time. It was a build, if to say the least, of courage. And it was a lot of soul searching of like, not only what I deserved, but like what women deserved, what people deserved. And what I saw just in the sports industry in general was, again, like I name it like this because this is how I've seen it, is there's this loss of humanhood. There's this loss of, you're like commoditized to like the 10th degree, and absolutely not if you're going to be someone who's pregnant. And like, let's add to all of the groups of marginalization that devalue people. And what I recognize in growth and with time and fighting for myself and fighting to find my way back into sport and deciding I'm not going to let any career, industry, or people dictate my happiness and what I do with my life.
A few years after Alysia had her first child, she was ready to expand her family again. At that point, her sponsor told her that they would terminate her contract. Alysia decided to have another kid anyway, because it's what she wanted. By the way, Alysia is now a mother of 3. She had her third kid in 2020.
With my first child, when I became pregnant, I hesitated to like share it. I was like 10 weeks, but I also felt it was important, and it was part of my authenticity and me wanting to like just like, I knew I was doing nothing wrong. And so when I shared I was pregnant, I called, I was like, brought up all the courage to call them. And I was like, I'm pregnant, They're like, what? I was like, I'm pregnant. They're like, what? I was like, I am pregnant. And they're like, oh my gosh, are you calling us because you're afraid of what's going to happen to your contract? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, don't worry about your contract. There was a woman at the head of athlete marketing and partnerships. The CEO was not a woman, but, she guaranteed verbally the same protections. The problem is she left by the time my daughter was born, and there were 2 men that took her place. And that was the first thing that they said in my contract. It was like, hey, we'll look at your contract. You didn't perform top tier in the last year. I was like, you mean the year I was pregnant for 9 months of them? I'm like, she'd said like it was going to be great, it was going to be fine, but the thing is, it wasn't in writing. So I still even encourage that athlete and all athletes to get it in writing, And so that was why, I started my nonprofit organization, And Mother, and it's about allowing for us to have our rights known and a space of advocacy. And, we are pushing the industry leaders to fight for and support women athletes. And we're fighting for contractual language standards that are not standards for men. That was what I was told. They're like, this contract is standard. I'm like, this is a standard contract for men. You have an injury clause in there. There's nothing about maternity or pregnancy, postpartum protections. You're expecting for people to be back in a performance body, in 12 weeks period of time. You want us to be like just winning all sorts of medals, and I think like the one thing I don't want is for athletes to think that they have to live in my first pregnancy, where I was able to win nationals at 6 months postpartum. That's not the standard. Like, we need to be allowing people space, My second, I was hardly able to participate in that way because, one, I was cut from my contract. And now you're thinking you don't have enough money to even participate and train in the sport in that way. A schedule where you're like carrying your baby with you because you now are childcare, because the money that you got from your job to help you with childcare is not existing. It's just all sorts of different stories. With my third, it took me a year to even feel like I can run more than 3 miles. So it's just all so different. And the standard can't be, rush back into it. Otherwise, you're going to lose your livelihood.
When we come back, Alysia talks about how she's impacted women athletes across the country, the organization she started called And Mother, and how motherhood has influenced her perspective on running. When the New York Times came out with a video about professional runner Alysia Montano, it sparked an important conversation in the sports industry. Women athletes started speaking out about losing their sponsorships when they became pregnant. Even for professional athletes, returning to training and racing after giving birth isn't easy. Shortly after the video was published, Alysia started an organization called And Mother. The nonprofit fights for women to be able to pursue motherhood and a career at the same time. Okay, so And Mother, talk to me about when you started it.
So my New York Times op-ed came out in 2019, and the reception was amazing. It was global reception. And I think it really had people see the catalyst of the time when I ran pregnant. And then the second time that I ran pregnant in 2017 at Nationals. And then they saw the culmination, this is what this is leading up to. And I decided hey, we have a lot of momentum off of this movement, and I need to make sure that we can make this movement into impact. What are we going to do? So 2019, the op-ed came out. In Mother's Day of 2020, we launched our nonprofit. We were full steam ahead after the op-ed came out. I decided to, get with as many people as I possibly could to kind of help me found the nonprofit and put in place, what exactly we were trying to do. Then a pandemic existed, that happened. And my third child was born in February 2020. And somehow, I was able to garner as much awareness as possible to get us to our third year now.
Yeah, I love it. The name And Mother, to me, it's like you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a runner, you're a professional athlete, you're a surfer, you're a snowboarder, and mother. That's it. Cool. Okay,
that's
cool.
it. You got it.
I love it. It's very powerful. Yeah. Do you have any stories from your community of how it's impacted any women?
Oh my gosh. Do we have time for another podcast? This is why I'm still doing this. It's like these impact stories are so huge. Just even knowing from our Changemakers grant at And Mother, the 14 athletes that were grantees from last year, and hearing their stories of what And Mother has done for them and what me speaking out has done for them. Hearing Allison Felix, who's on And Mother's board, kind of share that she would have never shared her story if it wasn't for me sharing my story. Kara Goucher, the same way, whom we all know. Those impact stories are huge. And then there's women who are running marathons, half marathons, 5Ks, 10Ks, who are sharing stories from their career tracks, and all sharing about the levels and loss of support when they became mothers and what they're fighting for and how it's encouraged them to continue to fight for themselves. And then I have people that are allies that are I would have never known this if it wasn't for me following you, Alysia. I've always watched you running. I've always, rooted for you in sport. And I myself am not a parent. I don't plan on becoming a parent, but I know how I need to show up and support parents across the board. And that's huge. You don't have to be in someone else's shoes to know that we need to care for them.
And Mother is partnering with some of the biggest races in the country. Last year, they were at the New York City Marathon, where they provided lactation accommodations along the race course. At the USA Track and Field Nationals, they ensured childcare on site for all families in the sports industry, not just the athletes. And Mother also pushes brands to adopt contractual language that protects women who want to have children. These programs offer the kind of support that Alysia has always wanted as a professional runner and a mother of 3. How has being a mom changed your relationship with running? How has it enhanced it?
Oh my gosh, there are levels to this. Well, first, this is just the truth. Children come along and they require a lot of time. And I care about the time that I spend with my children. I care about them seeing me active. I care about encouraging them to be active. And it's made me really aware of how I talk to myself, how I talk about running, how I talk about movement, how I share with them about, their own pursuits and how they play and those feelings. And I want them to remember those feelings of play, because ultimately that's what running starts out for us, right? It's play. And that's what it can continue to be. I think somewhere along the line for a lot of people, especially those folks who are doing it in a performance aspect, and some people who get stuck on numbers, myself included, always going for the PR, feeling down about, if I don't get it, why am I doing this? Like getting back to that like core of play, seeing my kids enjoy it in that way always brings me back to my core.
So like, what does that look like for you?
I feel like I speak in a playful manner with my kids. Gosh, my tone is always about encouragement. My daughter, for instance, she just joined Girls on the Run, which I'm so stoked about. And I did not ask her to do it. So I was like, she's like, Mom, I want to join this after school program. I go, okay, what is it? She's like, Girls on the Run. I was like, ugh, keep it inside. Oh my God. I was like, cool. When is it? Get on the internet and oh gosh, she sent me nothing. Like I don't have papers or anything to figure it out. I just did the fast Google search, looked at our area, signed her up. But, when we're talking about running and all the things that she wants to do with it, and then, the way I just talked to her is just encouraging her to have a good time, and also letting her know it's okay to, be competitive. It's okay to, fall, but you do need to get back up.
Love it. Alysia, you're so badass. I love talking with you. Do you have any magic run stories that you want to share?
Oh my gosh. I have so many stories. I honestly would love it if you guys could come out here, hang out with us for a little bit, because if you kind of saw how I rolled, you probably a little terrified.
How do you do it all?
I just do it. It's the fling method, It's the fling method. It's put one limb out and then everything else follows. My thing is, my North Star is happiness. And I always go towards that feeling. I'm not saying I'm not human. I'm not exempt from depressive feelings and, anger and any of those things. But my North Star is happiness. And that is not to be cliche. It's just as true for me. It's, again, the same reason why I chose to have my kids. I never let anybody else dictate what was going to be happy for me, because I can feel that ping of my intentional being, like who I know I am. And I just fling towards her. Like, that's who I want. That's who I want to hang out with. It's her.
Alysia Montano, thank you so much for coming on Wild Ideas Worth Living. You are such a rock star. If you want to learn more about Alysia's organization, And Mother, you can go to their website, andmother.org. That's ANDMOTHER.org. To keep in touch with Alysia, her latest projects, and her adorable kids, check out her Instagram at Alysia Montano. That's ALYSIAMONTANO. Wild Ideas Worth Living is part of the REI Podcast Network. It's hosted by me, Shelby Stanger, produced by Annie Fassler, Sylvia Thomas, and Sam Piers-Nitzberg of Puddle Creative, and our senior producer is Jenny Barber. Our executive producers are Paolo Motola and Joe Crosby. As always, we love it when you follow the show, when you rate it, and when you take the time to review it wherever you listen. And remember, some of the best adventures happen when you follow your wildest ideas.